So I have just got done watching the penultimate episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi, episode 5, and I can happily tell you that this is much better than the absolute drivel that we had last week. This episode was actually fun to watch. They did things that made sense from a storytelling perspective that actually enhanced individual character moments, and it's what people have been clamouring for since the show first aired. And it's stupid to me that they finally started to do it in the penultimate episode, but despite that, I loved what they did, and I really enjoyed it. However, it does still have a lot of problems. There was still quite a few moments in this episode where I just raised my eyebrow and questioned the creative decisions made. At times, I do wonder if these shows and episodes go through review processes in both the storytelling and visual departments where people will point out flaws and issues so they can rectify them before release, and it's for that reason that I actually think this show has been a little bit rushed, especially visually, because there were moments again where it just doesn't look very good, and I'll get to that. As always, there are spoilers ahead, so you have been warned. Firstly, I want to get my biggest criticisms out of the way straight away, so the length. Another short episode that could have and should have been longer. I am going to keep saying this until something changes because it came in at just over 30 minutes long, and for a 6-episode miniseries, it's not good enough. And while I do think the final episode is going to be ridiculously long, like an hour and 20 minutes or something like that, the shortness of these episodes make things feel rushed where they shouldn't be and the pacing off where it could have been better. Secondly, the music. John Williams' Obi-Wan theme is fantastic. The rest of the music for this show is awful. Music is such a key part of Star Wars. It adds another dimension to what makes Star Wars that much better than other sci-fi stuff. And the music in this show, honestly, is just not good enough in any way. I don't know who composes this, I don't know the repertoire of he or she, but at the end of the day, the soundtrack is the most generic, boring thing I've ever heard, and it doesn't represent these characters or this universe in any shape or form. Every time a villain is on screen, especially Darth Vader, you're expecting a powerful, strong piece of music that represents him in the original trilogy, even if it's not directly the Imperial March. But the music for the villains and Darth Vader is just so poor. There was a tiny little segment later in the episode where you could feel the Imperial March creeping into the soundtrack, but that doesn't save the soundtrack from generally being bad. And where you usually have incredible bits of music that just elevates Star Wars to the next level, this soundtrack doesn't have it, and so a lot of the time, musically, it feels dull and boring and it's not good enough. Now, the big criticisms aside, let's get to the story. Finally, we have callbacks to the prequel trilogy. Now, I'm not somebody who thought to myself, we needed flashbacks to make this story work, but the way they did the flashbacks here worked a charm. And I actually think that they could have done it in previous episodes to not only help the length, but to better add depth and to add a level of poignance that was missing in certain scenarios. The episode starts with a younger Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker around the time of Attack of the Clones, which is a great thing for the 20th anniversary, and they are sparring with one another. The whole purpose of this is to showcase Anakin's recklessness, his overindulgence in winning and fighting, his lack of seeing the bigger picture, and how that would eventually translate into his nature as a Sith Lord, as Darth Vader, and it's very foreboding. And Obi-Wan is using this to his advantage to try and figure out what Vader is going to do next. But instead of Obi-Wan directly telling the audience with a bit of dialogue or a quote, the flashback serves the purpose of showing you instead Obi-Wan's thought process, and Anakin's at times too. Like I said, I think this could have been done in previous episodes, and I do think it should have been done because the way they did it worked a treat. But with that said, we realise this flashback is actually Anakin's, and we instantly cut to Darth Vader on the bridge of a Star Destroyer, and he is awarding Reva Grand Inquisitor for tracking Obi-Wan, and we'll get to her in a minute. Vader is ready to corner Obi-Wan to take him alive. He's got his eyes fixed on Obi-Wan. He doesn't care about the rebels on the planet at this point. So as the episode moves forward, the rebels are getting prepared to escape. However, Leia's little droid has been hacked and causes the base to shut down. This then traps them in the hangar, and the Star Destroyer sends a big party of stormtroopers and Reva to break the base and to get the rebels and Obi-Wan out. Leia goes off to try and find Lola and to help open the hangar doors as she can squeeze into vents where the electrical systems are and to try and override things. And while I think this was a little bit silly that a little 10-year-old kid is going to crawl into electrical vents and just know how to fix it, It's a minor nitpick, so I'm not too bothered. A huge contingent of stormtroopers and Reavers set up these guns to blow the door down and to break through, and for a good couple of minutes they are just shooting this door to absolutely no avail. Obi-Wan then goes to the door and essentially talks to Reva, and it's here that we get a reveal of what Reva's trying to do. She's trying to kill Anakin, as many people speculated, because she was the kid in the flashback scene for Order 66. And we also see some flashbacks here of Nightfall Anakin and the 501st, and I love what they did here. It was brief, yes, but it was powerful, and again, another great usage of flashbacks. Now, we can see in this moment that Reva is going down the redemption path, and I think this is too abrupt. Reva hasn't done anything to earn redemption, and I actually think it would have been better a plot twist if she never fell to the dark side and what she was doing from the beginning was essentially acting. I think it would have been better if she was pretending to be evil to get close to Vader so she could kill him. In that scenario, there'd be no redemption arc necessary and it would have been a more unique story, but no, she is evil, she wanted power, but she's also trying to do it to get close to Vader, to kill him in an act of vengeance. Now, this does work for the story, so I can't criticize that, and it actually does make sense, but I just think it could have been a little bit more creative with Reva instead being a Jedi spy pretending to be evil, instead of another redemption arc. But what happens next is one of my biggest gripes with Star Wars under Disney. Is Reva just sticks her lightsaber through the door and cuts it open with no effort. And then 5 seconds later, you can see Obi-Wan hitting stormtroopers with his lightsaber and it's like a baseball bat. It doesn't cut through anything. The depiction of lightsabers in this show, and just Disney Star Wars in general, is really off for me. Why do lightsabers sometimes cut through things, and why do they sometimes not cut through things? The fact that this door was being shot at for 5 minutes by giant cannons, which didn't make a dent to it, and then all of a sudden the lightsaber just cuts through it, as it should, but 5 minutes later it's being treated as a baseball bat. I just don't understand why lightsabers are used so inconsistently. Anyway, gripe aside, the stormtroopers flood the halls and there's a big fight scene where they're all shooting each other and Obi-Wan is blocking blasters and he's cutting down stormtroopers, which was a lot of fun to watch. It was much better than what was done in the last episode. And then sadly, Tala gets shot, as does Ned B, and she sacrifices to essentially blow the hallway and to buy, again, some time. The whole scenario is a big callback to Rogue One. In fact, it literally just was Rogue One with Tala and Ned B instead of K2SO, and while I thought it was a good moment, I don't think we've spent enough time with Tala or Ned B to be hit as strongly as Rogue One's moment of sacrifice. And while it was done well and it served the show in the right way, it's a shame because I liked Tala as a character and I thought we could have done more with her. Now, there are more flashback scenes dotted in between these scenes with Obi-Wan and Anakin sparring that just are further reinforcing the idea that Anakin is too focused on the smaller details and not the bigger picture. Now, Leia manages to find Lola and she removes the bolt that was hacking her, and Lola helps her open the hangar bay doors and everybody gets onto the ship. And then we cut to Darth Vader, who is now on the planet and he's walking through the hallway. And this is the only time in the show that the music actually begins to feel like it's representing Vader because of the small beats of the Imperial March. And you're starting to feel like, yeah, this is more like Vader, but then it just cuts back to the crappy soundtrack and it just loses that spark again. But anyway, this is where the episode really kind of hits. And of course, it's a Darth Vader situation that does it. The transporter is about to fly away and Darth Vader grabs it with the Force and he yanks it back down to the ground. And then he starts to just rip it apart piece by piece to find Obi-Wan. And this whole scene was just so cool. It really showcased the venom and the potency of Darth Vader as Star Wars should. But there still was a problem with it, and that is the visual effects, as I mentioned earlier. The idea is brilliant. The execution, generally, is also brilliant. But like last week's episode with the speeders, they're having a real problem with forced perspective. Darth Vader is way too big against the transporter, and the transporter is way too big for the hangar. The perspectives are just wrong, and so visually it looks really, really off. Now, Star Wars has always had a problem with ships and people being out of scale at times, but it's not too noticeable to the point where it takes you out of the moment. But this is the second episode in a row where it's just really, really glaring how off the perspective is. And it leads me to believe that it's either rushed, or the volume technology they're using for visual shots is causing a real problem with wider perspective shots. Anyway, as he's pulling this ship apart piece by piece, the foreboding from the flashbacks about Anakin not seeing the bigger picture come into full force, and we realise and he realises that this is a diversion and the actual transporter behind it was the one carrying all of the rebels, and it gets away. Now, while I do understand that this is a younger Darth Vader, I would have thought that he at this point in time would have taken measures to ensure that Obi-Wan couldn't escape again, so maybe some questionable writing on that part. Reva, for some reason, decides this is the right time to attack Darth Vader. Questionable, but the fight scene between the two of them was a lot of fun. They again do a great job of just showcasing how superior Darth Vader is to everybody. He isn't breaking a sweat to fight Reva, he is literally gliding and dodging every one of her attacks and using the Force to block out any slight attempt at hitting him. And I think this whole fight scene is done expertly. The editing at times is a little bit too quick cut, but generally I really can't fault this whole scenario. It gets to the point where you can tell that Darth Vader is just bored of gliding past her attempts at hitting him, and so he literally yanks the lightsaber out of her hands and he pulls it apart, and he gives her the other half of the blade. We then have a duel between Reva and Vader, and he just outclasses her in every way, as he should, and then Darth Vader reveals that he was just using Reva, and that he knew that she was the Padawan in the temple from the flashbacks earlier, and he was using her rage as a tool to get what he wanted. He then stabs her through the chest, just like he did when she was a child in the flashback scenes with Nightfall Vader, and it's also revealed that the Grand Inquisitor is alive all along, as he should be, and he does the same thing, and he shows up and he just taunts her. Now, another questionable decision here is that Vader lets her live again. We know that Darth Vader doesn't show mercy. We know that Darth Vader is brutal, and instead of killing Reva, they just leave her there. They try to explain this by having the Grand Inquisitor tell her that they're going to leave her in the dirt like a rat from where they found her, but at the same time, I don't think Darth Vader would let someone live after they've literally tried to stab him in the back. Anyway, we leave, we cut to the people on the transporter, and Obi-Wan feels something in the Force. He feels that something is wrong. And while the transporter gets away from Darth Vader, there was of course a Star Destroyer sitting in orbit, and now they're being hunted by that. But that's not what Obi-Wan feels. Reva, who survived, Darth Vader again, actually finds Obi-Wan's communicator device that was dropped, and finds a message between Bail Organa and Obi-Wan where he's talking about how he'll look after Luke if he doesn't make it back. Now, I have been very, very lenient, unlike others, with the retconning and the supposed breaking of continuity with the show so far, and it's very concerning to me that they're even considering having Reva go to Tatooine and even threaten Luke in any way, shape or form. We know from A New Hope that Luke doesn't know what the Force is, he doesn't know what a lightsaber is, and for me, they will break continuity and canon if they have Inquisitors or anybody that is related to Darth Vader in any sense find him. With that said though, I can't fault it necessarily until we've seen next week's episode, but the foreboding nature of it does make me concerned, and then the episode ends. So in conclusion, a fun episode that I really did enjoy, but there were things that were questionable creatively. But I am very glad that they finally got Hayden back, reprising his role as Anakin in more than just a ghostly visage form, and I'm glad that the episode was so much better than last week's. From a storytelling perspective, from an action perspective, the pacing, everything, it was just better in every way. But again though, like I said, I don't really know how they're going to adequately conclude this story in a way that's wholly satisfying. I think there's way too many loose threads, and unless the final episode is really, really long, I can't see how they're going to wrap this up in a way that does work conclusively, but we're all going to find that out together next Wednesday. So as always, if you enjoyed the review, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you want to hear what I have to say about the finale of Obi-Wan Kenobi, perhaps consider subscribing. I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, may the Force be with you. Always.